The Torah portion that follows the Ten Commandments, parashat Yitro, in the Torah is called Mishpatim, and it has much legislation. In fact, it's called Sefer HaBrit, the Book of the Covenant, because of all the rules. Now, many different law codes that preceded the Torah have rules that are fairly similar, but the Torah is the first one that has all of these rules kind of in the same section. Just read you a note from the Eitz Chaim Chumash that's used now in conservative synagogues. It says, outside of Israel, you would have to go to 3 different addresses to get the material that's in Mishpatim. The Torah combines law, as in the Code of Hammurabi, cultic instructions, as from a priestly manual, and moral exhortations found in wisdom literature. This is the only Near Eastern literature in which an amalgam of these 3 interests is found in law, cult, and wisdom. That's from Moshe Greenberg. Judaism is based not only on major pronouncements of the Decalogue, but on hundreds of minor ways in which we are called to sanctify our relationship with other people and with God. And so that's what Parshat Mishpatim tries to do. Previously, we had, of course, basically in all of the book of Genesis and most of Exodus so far, mostly narrative, stories, and a little law. Now the Torah begins to shift to have much, much more law, with many, many mitzvot contained in this week's Torah portion. Now, I'll just give you a little perspective on some of the issues of the news and how it relates to the meaning of the Parsha. Well, first thing, I was reading Time magazine this week, and one of the major stories in Time magazine is about all of the research that says that people who are religious, that people of faith, have better health, that they live longer, that they have better health in many ways, and this has been documented by many studies, that prayer and belief in God and having faith in God is actually something that's very good for you. At the same time, one of the major stories of the week said that there are 2,500 languages in the world that are under threat of extinction. I didn't even know there were that many languages in the world. But evidently there's about 6,900 languages that are known, and 2,500 of them are endangered, says the United Nations Cultural Agency. In 2001, there were only 900 threatened with extinction, but it seems like we've uncovered more languages. Some are spoken by only 4 people, 6 people. So 2,500 languages are threatened with extinction. You think about that in light of the fact that some people saw Hebrew as a dead language, but look how it's revived in the state of Israel now. They're speaking Hebrew, and Jews all over the world learn Hebrew. Hebrew is the language of the Bible, and as I often say, if you want to write something down in a language that you can pretty sure Jews will be able to read 1,000 years from now, Hebrew would be the language to go, not English. We've only spoken English for a short time, and who knows how long we'll speak English now, as you see into the future. I like to speak English for a long time, our people, but you never know. Yiddish has been around for 1,000 years, having a revival of sorts. But the thread of the Hebrew, that's been the key language of the Jewish people, carries on, I think, the power of the Torah, and is a symbol of the power of the Torah through the many generations. And so we have here the Sefer Brit, this law book with many, many customs that are similar, as I said, to other ancient law codes, but also different in the fact that it brings together so many different aspects of it. But one of the things that separates us from other people of faith, the extremists, is on the nature of the Torah revelation, and I have other videos on this issue, and give you one example, and that of slavery. Now, this Torah portion talks about some of the rules of slavery, and granted, it's not exactly the same kind of slavery that people experienced in America. In fact, the commentary in the Torah says, first, we must note that this passage does not refer to the Egyptian model of slavery, a condition of cruel permanent bondage. It deals with people who basically make themselves indentured servants to pay off debts. Second of all, it says here that the Torah's overall emphasis on human freedom and dignity, its insistence that human beings are called to serve God and not a human master, in time led to a strengthening of the rules protecting the rights of slaves, and ultimately to a rejection of slavery entirely. But still you have the problem of how could the Torah be given by God, if it's God's wisdom, countenance something like that. Well, there's a wonderful book by James Kugel called Don't Know Much About the Bible, Kugel, and he talks about how this is something that Orthodox Jews would not accept, something that extremists don't accept. He says, this is a place where the Bible gets tricky for those who still want to make the Bible and biblical law literally, take it literally. Jewish tradition identifies 613 laws in the Torah. Many of them governed sacrificial rites no longer performed by Jews or Christians. What follows is a sampling of some of the laws that Moses gave to the people of Israel in the Exodus. They should remind modern readers that the Bible was composed a long time ago for a very different group of people. This is where people have to determine what law is appropriate to desert nomads, and which are universal laws that transcend time and setting. And Orthodox Jews probably would not put it in that kind of language. They wouldn't say it that way. The rabbis themselves understood that there were some mitzvot that were perplexing, and they tried to figure out ways to make them to be not operative. For example, the idea that you kill a stubborn, rebellious child. Well, the rabbis made it impossible to do that, and they said some of the laws were just put there to test our hermeneutical abilities, our exegetical abilities. And so that is a little bit about the challenges of this parsha, but there's other issues too. We have the holiday of Purim coming up, and I have a video that talks about the true story of Purim, basically saying that the Purim stories is written in the Torah, in the Bible, not in the Torah, in the rest of the Bible, in Ketuvim, is not literally true. And I give many reasons why, what's obvious to most scholars. Well, obviously there are some Jews who don't agree with that. I got this kind of nasty email. I was going to respond to your Purim speech that I saw on the internet called Purim, the True Story, but I realized that your entire speech is in essence the biggest and greatest Purim joke that any fat, funny-looking puppet or clown can concoct out of her sour stomach. So a real response is superfluous. I must congratulate you on the comic story. I'm still laughing. Well, of course, some Orthodox Jews will have that attitude. They will not pay attention to scholarship in this regard, and they will go on believing a text to be literally true even when they're not meant to be true. I mentioned that in light of another major article that was in Newsweek, that of Darwin, and talking about how it was not only the 200th anniversary of the birth of Lincoln, but also of Darwin, and all the things we've learned about evolution. And of course, Bible literalists say the world is 5,769 years old, when most of us say that that's not true, that the Bible's not a scientific document, it's not scientifically meant to be taken literally, and that when we find fossils of dinosaurs that are billions of years old, or hundreds of millions of years old, we can understand that. At the same time, as I'm recording this today on Friday, there was a news release that said that the largest explosion ever of a supernova was just recorded by scientists, which is 12.2 billion light years away, which means it left its light source 12.2 billion years ago. So it's hard to imagine a universe that's only 5,000 years old when that kind of scientific phenomenon happens. And so there are obviously wide differences between us and the extremists, and yet we come together with this common understanding that religion is very important, that we are people of faith. We may differ slightly on the way in which the Bible has its origins, whether or not you have to do intellectual pretzel somersaults to say about a verse that somehow countenances a kind of slavery, even if it wasn't as bad as the slavery of Egypt. Or you can simply say that was a different time period, a different moral ethos. We've advanced since then, as non-fanatic Jews can do. And yet we come together with the basic understanding of the power of the Torah, and the power of the Torah for instructing us in our lives, and the basic belief that God inspired human beings to develop this covenant of this book of the covenant in parashat Mishpatim, to give us a wide-ranging application of God's desires for us, including the desires both of the cult, of how we worship God, how we deal with one another, and how we sanctify the world. Shalom.